Can you believe that in Bangladesh, even the shirt you're wearing could be hiding a whole chain of dark truths behind it? These 15 stories will pull you through factories, dead rivers, toxic air, and the unwritten rules that force people to live in ways you'd never imagine. Some of it sounds like a movie, but it's real life for millions every single day. Stay until the end, because the deeper you go, the more you'll realize this. The scariest part isn't poverty, it's what people are forced to accept just to survive. Number 1. The dark side of global fashion. What is the shirt you're wearing really hiding? Bangladesh is now the world's second largest clothing exporter. Every single day, millions of items are made for global brands, and the main reason usually isn't advanced technology, it's ultra-cheap labor. Bangladesh is a crucial link in the fashion supply chain, where cheap on the shelf is often created by pressure at the source. The current minimum wage for garment workers in Bangladesh is about 12,500 Dhaka a month, roughly $113. Broken down by day, that's around $3.77. With 12 to 14-hour shifts, the real hourly pay drops to roughly 27 to 31 cents an hour, widely seen as among the lowest in South and Southeast Asia. Even that isn't enough to rise above the poverty line. Many studies suggest a basic living wage would need to be close to double, meaning the gap between minimum wage and a wage you can actually live on is still huge. Working conditions reflect that imbalance. Nearly a third of workers do more than 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, beyond legal limits. The workforce is mostly young women. Many leave their hometowns believing they'll earn money and change their lives, but end up trapped in packed factories with poor ventilation and heavy chemical exposure. Those factors turn what sounds like just sewing clothes into a long-term health risk. Health problems often show up early. Around 73% of workers experience dermatitis or rashes from chemical contact. More than half deal with ongoing respiratory issues. Many regularly suffer fevers, chest pain, and extreme fatigue. In washing and dyeing stages, workers can come into direct contact with toxic substances without enough training or proper protective gear, so damage builds up over time. It's the kind of risk that doesn't look dramatic in the moment, but it slowly wears the body down, day after day. Workplace disasters have shown how badly safety systems can fail. The Tazreen factory fire killed 112 workers because exits were locked and stairways were blocked. What makes it even darker is that risks like these had been flagged during inspections, but fixes didn't happen fast enough before tragedy struck. When a safety flaw is treated like a cost, the final bill is often paid in human lives. Even deeper in the supply chain is child labor, especially in subcontracted workshops. Some research reports that every underage worker interviewed was employed illegally, most of them girls, and the rates of threats or abuse tend to be higher than for adults. Once production gets pushed down into lower-tier subcontractors, monitoring working conditions becomes even harder. Meanwhile, the economic value on the other end of the chain is massive. Many retail giants make hundreds of billions of dollars a year, while a worker in Bangladesh often earns just over $1,300 annually. Sometimes, a shirt sold for a few $100s can equal hundreds of workdays for the person who made it. And that's how the dark side of global fashion shows itself, not on the runway, but behind the label. Number 2. A country drinking water mixed with waste. Why are people forced to use it every day? Bangladesh sits in South Asia, and most of the country is low-lying land built from the fertile sediment of the Ganges and Brahmaputra river system. It covers about 57,000 square miles, but the population has already passed 173 million, placing it among the most densely populated countries in the world. When a low-lying region has to carry that many people, pressure on sanitation and clean water explodes. Bangladesh has been pulled into a long-running crisis where using the toilet and drinking water are directly tied to public health and survival. An estimated 65 million people, more than a third of the population, still don't have access to safely managed sanitation. Around 2.1 million people still practice open defecation. And that leads to a blunt, uncomfortable reality. About 230 tons of human waste are discharged every day straight into rivers, canals, and ponds without treatment. In other words, hundreds of tons of waste flow directly into water sources that people still rely on for daily life, over and over again, literally every day. The situation is often described as most severe in Dhaka, the capital with more than 20 million residents. On paper, many families have toilets, but most of the city's waste still isn't handled safely. Dhaka has almost no proper fecal sludge management system. When septic tanks fill up, people call a vacuum truck, but the core problem is that the city lacks enough legal, functional disposal and treatment sites. So after the waste is sucked out, it's often dumped into storm drains and then carried straight into the river. The hardware might exist, but the final step, safe treatment, is left hanging. The irony is that Bangladesh isn't completely empty-handed on infrastructure. Dozens of sludge treatment plants have been built across the country, but many run at low capacity or sit unused. Even though over 90% of households have toilets, about 95% of waste is still handled unsafely. So the outcome isn't very different from open defecation, it's just hidden behind the modern shell of a toilet. Alongside fecal pollution, Bangladesh also faces another major drinking water threat: arsenic in groundwater. Nearly 57 million people are using water with arsenic levels above what the WHO recommends. Almost half the country's tube wells exceed 10 micrograms per liter, meaning tens of millions live with long-term risks like cancer, cardiovascular disease, and neurological damage. In some villages, around 25% of people already show skin lesions from chronic arsenic exposure, a visible warning sign of poison in the water. The crisis becomes even clearer in communities that live entirely on the river. Around 500,000 Bede people live on boats, and they use the same water for cooking, bathing, drinking, and sanitation. Nearly the entire community lives below the poverty line, and with no real alternative, they're stuck in a familiar loop. Dirty water leads to illness, illness drains money and strength, and poverty keeps them from ever leaving that river behind. Number 3. Bare-handed workers in toxic gas. What are they breathing just to earn a meal? Right beneath the crowded streets of Bangladesh, there's an underground world most city residents never see, yet they depend on it every day. It's the world of dark sewer holes and septic tanks under your feet. Down there, there's barely any light, barely any oxygen, and mistakes are basically not allowed. One wrong move, 1 minute too long, and a life can end on the spot. The people who do this job are often called manual sanitation workers. They work with almost no machinery and no real ventilation system. Their tools are simple: a metal shovel, a plastic bucket, an old iron bar, and their bare hands. Before climbing down, many pour kerosene inside because they believe the strong smell can reduce toxic gas. Then they wait around 10 minutes like it's a ritual passed down by word of mouth. Once the cover is opened, it turns into a race against time. There's no official safe time written in the law, but workers share one number through experience: about 15 minutes. After that, the body starts getting hit hard by gases like methane, hydrogen sulfide, ammonia, and carbon monoxide. The symptoms often follow the same pattern: confusion, dizziness, collapsing, and finally suffocation. In many cases, people don't even get the chance to pull the victim back up before it's already over. Since 2014, Bangladesh has recorded at least 156 deaths directly linked to cleaning sewers and septic tanks. And many observers point out that even this isn't the full picture because there's no consistent official reporting system. A haunting example happened in July 2024 in Joypurhat, when 6 people died in the same incident because they went down into the same septic tank one after another. The youngest victim was only 15. What makes it even scarier is that about 5 years earlier, the same area saw another incident with 6 victims, showing this isn't a one-off accident, it's a pattern that repeats. And for that level of danger, the pay is painfully low. On average, a sanitation worker earns around 12,000 to 14,000 Dhaka a month, roughly $3.3 to $3.9 a day. Working full-time for a whole year, their total income can stay under $750. Women doing the same work often earn about 22% less, even though the risk is no different. In short, it's one of the most dangerous urban jobs, yet it sits among the lowest paid. Even masks and goggles are rarely used. Not because they don't exist, but because many workers feel like wearing them makes breathing even harder in a space that already lacks oxygen. They're forced to choose between immediate discomfort and an invisible risk. And many choose whatever feels lighter in the moment, meaning they go in with almost nothing. Over time, the damage builds. Respiratory illness, skin disease, eye problems, and heart issues are common. Some workers have done this for decades, suffered heart attacks, and still return because they have no other way to survive. The smell might fade as they get used to it, but the social stigma rarely does, making this job not only dangerous, but isolating. Number 4. The world's most dangerous ship. Graveyard. What's really hiding under the rust? Chittagong doesn't feel like a normal industrial zone. It feels like the final stop of the global shipping industry. If the world once knew Bangladesh through dangerous garment factories, the ship-breaking yards in Sitakunda near Chittagong are an even harsher version of that story. This is where massive ships at the end of their life are dragged in and turned into scrap using methods many wealthy countries no longer accept. An estimated 70% of large ships worldwide are dismantled here. In the second quarter of 2024 alone, Bangladesh scrapped 48 out of 94 ships globally, more than half of the world's total. That means a huge amount of heavy metals, toxic chemicals, leftover oil, and industrial waste from international vessels gets concentrated on a short stretch of coastline. When the shipping industry's trash piles up in one place, the question isn't whether pollution exists, it's how extreme it has become. The process hasn't changed much in decades. Oil tankers and container ships weighing tens of thousands of tons are driven onto shore at high tide on purpose so they get stuck. When the water pulls back, the cutting begins. Workers use blowtorches, hammers, and crude tools to tear apart structures designed to survive storms and waves. Proper protective equipment is rare. That means workers stand in front of hot steel plates, sealed compartments, and strange gases they can't control. From 2005 to 2024, at least 257 workers have died in these ship-breaking yards, an average of more than 13 deaths a year. And that's only what can be counted, because the industry has no complete reporting system. Many cases, especially among workers without contracts or those working night shifts, may never be officially recorded. In some years, reported deaths have gone above 20, showing these risks are not occasional. Most workers are poor migrants from rural areas. They work around 70 hours a week, but earn only $1 to $5 a day. No contracts, no insurance, no sick leave. Wages can depend entirely on yard owners, and there have even been reports of workers forced to sign blank papers, which sounds unreal until you realize how unbalanced power is in this setting. Child labor still appears here. Estimates suggest around 13% of the workforce are children, and during illegal night shifts, the number may reach 20%. Many start as young as 9 to 13 years old because smaller bodies can squeeze into narrow ship compartments. But those spaces often contain toxic fumes, dust, and chemicals that even adults struggle to handle. The worst danger isn't only sudden accidents, it's long-term exposure. Around 35% of workers have been recorded with illnesses linked to asbestos dust, with lung damage ranging from 30 to 60%. When ships are cut open, asbestos can spread into the air and stay in the lungs for decades, leading to lung cancer or mesothelioma, which is almost impossible to cure. What's disturbing is that even authorities admit asbestos still exists in many ships, even when paperwork claims the vessel was cleaned. Many workers don't truly know what they're being exposed to. They only know they must work fast. The marine environment suffers too. Burned oil, ammonia, heavy metals, and other toxic compounds can be dumped straight into the sea. The air around the yards carries high levels of harmful organic substances, harming fish stocks and threatening the livelihoods of nearby coastal communities. Meanwhile, profits pile up in the hands of a small group of yard owners. Some can earn 20 to 30 times their purchase cost for scrap ships, with net worth reaching hundreds of millions of dollars. The contrast is brutal. A few dollars a day and health traded away on one side, and rising wealth built on the end of ships on the other. Number 5. A stolen childhood in Bangladesh. What forces kids to grow up before they even get to be kids? Bangladesh has a number that shocks a lot of people. Around 7.4 million children aged 5 to 17 are involved in labor. Within that, about 4.7 million are only 5 to 14 years old. Compared to 2019, the number of working children has increased by around 1.2 million, meaning the trend isn't shrinking, it's getting heavier. In percentage terms, nearly 10% of Bangladeshi children are working instead of focusing only on school and development. What's even darker is that the hours aren't light. Children under 14 have been recorded working an average of about 64 hours a week, with some cases reaching 110 hours. That's far beyond what many adults in the West would consider extreme. Meanwhile, the law allows only light work up to 42 hours per week for children aged 12 to 13. The problem is, the law exists on paper, but inspections and enforcement are nearly absent in many settings. The pay for those stolen hours is extremely low. The average is around $18 a month, only half the minimum wage for an adult. That means many children earn less than $1 a day. For poor families, even that money can be a lifeline. But for employers, children become a grim kind of ideal workforce, cheap, easy to control, and less able to fight back. Most child labor happens in rural areas, but urban slums show unusually high rates too. Children appear in farming, garment work, leather processing, and especially brick kilns. Brick kilns are often described as one of the most dangerous environments because of dust, heat, and the intensity of the work. Estimates suggest around 70% of brick kilns use child labor. Many families are trapped in debt, turning "everyone works" into a method of repayment. In those cases, children aren't just working, they're working to carry financial obligations meant for adults. Health damage is almost guaranteed. Children working in brick kilns often suffer respiratory problems, serious back pain, hand and leg injuries, and exhaustion. With little protection and no stable health care, many carry long-term injuries into adulthood, sometimes for life. Violence often comes with the job. Many surveys report that 70 to 100% of child workers have experienced physical abuse. Emotional abuse and neglect are widespread. For the roughly 421,000 children working as domestic helpers, mostly girls, the risk is even higher because they work inside private homes with almost no oversight. More than 70% report being beaten, and about 17% report sexual abuse. When the workplace is a closed house, the ability to ask for help and the chance of being protected drop to the lowest level. Number 6. How can a baby girl disappear from a population? Is she missing on paper or missing in real life? In Bangladesh, gender inequality isn't only about social attitudes, it often works like a system that runs through many layers of life. Some data suggests the imbalance starts early, even before birth, and in the first moments after a child is born. In 2010, an estimated 416,000 girls aged 0 to 19 were considered missing from the expected population, about 1.4% of the female population. When sex ratios in certain areas rise above the natural range, especially for first births and in urban settings, it's often seen as a sign of son preference and the continued existence of prenatal sex selection. After birth, the gap keeps widening in education and work. Only about 44% of women participate in the labor force, while men are over 81%, a difference of nearly 37 percentage points. Even when doing the same work, women earn about 31% less, shaped by job segregation and barriers to higher paid roles. In education, the dropout rate for girls in secondary school is reported at around 42%, and only about 10% complete grade 10. Among ages 15 to 24, nearly half of young women are classified as NEET, meaning not in education, not employed, and not in training. That rate is about 4.4 times higher than for young men, and it's often linked to early marriage, family responsibilities, and limited opportunities. It creates a loop. Less schooling and less work make women more financially dependent. That dependence is reinforced by inheritance rules. In many cases, sons receive double what daughters do, and in comparable situations, husbands often receive more than wives. When property rights are unequal, financial independence shrinks, and inequality becomes institutional, not just personal choice. Risk rises further when women enter childbirth. Maternal mortality is reported at around 196 deaths per 100,000 births. About 38% of deaths happen on the day of delivery, and more than a third of women are transferred multiple times before they die. Those details point to serious gaps in healthcare, especially when quick treatment is needed. In political power, women's representation remains thin. Out of 300 parliamentary seats, only about 20 women are directly elected, under 7%. When most decision-making still sits with men, policies that affect women often change slowly. From prenatal son preference, to fewer chances in school, to weaker access to economic life, lower property rights, higher health risks, and less voice in politics, the feeling of disappearing isn't a mysterious vanishing. It's a system that keeps pushing girls off the track of opportunity. Number 7. Brutal marriages. Why can't some people step out even once? In many parts of Bangladesh, marriage still functions more like a social and economic arrangement than a personal choice. In rural areas, over 80% of marriages are arranged, and in cities the rate is still around 50%. Among young people aged 15 to 25, more than 51% have been reported as having been forced into marriage. The rate is higher for girls, and especially high among those with less education, showing how uneven decision-making can be. According to UNICEF, around 51% of girls marry before 18, 29% before 15, and 2% before 11, even though laws against child marriage have existed for nearly a century. These numbers reveal a harsh reality. Laws can exist for a long time, but society can still find ways around them, especially when economic pressure and family reputation feel bigger than anything else. In many cases, marriage is negotiated through honor and connections, where the fit between two families matters more than the compatibility of the couple. Dowry practices, even though illegal, still exist. In Dhaka, an average of around 22 women per year have been killed over dowry issues. Over 17 years, that's about 374 cases, but the conviction rate is only around 3%. The gap between violence and punishment sends a chilling message. Harm can happen, and there's no guarantee anyone will pay for it. Violence inside the home is not rare. National-level studies suggest around 70% of women have experienced intimate partner violence, and some surveys push that number as high as 89%. Around 41% report violence within the last 12 months. During COVID-19 lockdowns, things got worse, with more than half of women saying violence increased. The most alarming part isn't only the violence, it's how violence becomes normalized. Some surveys show 55% of men and up to 90% of women believe a husband has reasons to hit his wife in certain situations. When victims are trained by society to believe abuse is acceptable, change becomes extremely difficult. Of course, some people do leave. Divorce rates have doubled to around 1.4 per 1,000 people, and women file more often, especially among those with higher education and income. Still, the rate remains lower than in many Western countries, showing that escaping an unsafe marriage is often a complicated journey with heavy barriers. And for women who choose their own partner, the backlash can be extreme. Acid attacks targeting women's faces after they reject a proposal are still mentioned as a form of punishment. Bangladesh has laws to control acid attacks, but enforcement is still not an easy story. Number 8. A deadly air crisis. Is there a place where one day of breathing feels like a lifetime of smoking? Imagine a normal day where every breath you take isn't just air, but a mix of fine dust and toxic gases going straight into your lungs. In Bangladesh, especially in Dhaka, that's not an exaggeration, it's everyday life. In early 2024, Dhaka repeatedly ranked among the most polluted cities in the world. At times, the AQI reached around 244, a very unhealthy level, even surpassing cities long associated with extreme pollution like New Delhi or Beijing. Looking wider, from 2018 to 2024, Bangladesh has consistently been among the most polluted countries globally, with PM 2.5 levels roughly 18 times higher than what the WHO recommends. What makes this frightening is that it's not limited to a few industrial zones. An estimated 166 million people are living in air that exceeds safe limits, and even areas considered relatively clean still fall inside the danger zone. The cost is measured in lives. Some estimates link air pollution to more than 159,000 premature deaths every year. Spread out, that's about 436 deaths a day, or roughly 18 every single hour. Numbers like that sound like wartime statistics, yet they come from people doing nothing more than breathing. In Dhaka, exposure is often explained in a very everyday way, by comparing it to cigarettes. Just moving around near construction sites and major roads can be roughly equivalent to smoking about 1.7 cigarettes a day. On the worst pollution days, exposure has been compared to as many as 23 cigarettes. It's not a perfect comparison, but it makes the danger easier to picture. Traffic isn't the only source. One major contributor is the ring of traditional brick kilns surrounding the city. Even though they contribute only about 1% of GDP, they are believed to generate nearly 60% of Dhaka's fine dust pollution. Winter makes everything worse. With little rain, smoke from brick kilns, construction dust, open burning, and vehicle exhaust combine into a thick gray haze, sometimes so dense that buildings across the street disappear. If outdoor air is dangerous, indoor air can be even worse. More than 75% of households still cook using wood, charcoal, or other biomass fuels. In some kitchens, PM 2.5 levels have been measured at up to 300 times the WHO guideline. Indoor air pollution is linked to nearly 107,000 deaths each year. Some estimates suggest around 12% of infant deaths are connected to cooking smoke. Half of all children under 2 suffer respiratory infections each year, and about 12.5% of adults live with COPD. The most frightening part is that no one can truly escape air, because breathing is not optional. Number 9. Where cars move slower than people walking. What is locking the entire city in place? Dhaka holds a record no city wants. Traffic so slow it can barely beat walking speed. Average travel speed once hovered around 21 kilometers per hour, but during rush hour it has dropped to about 4.8 kilometers per hour. The city is often labeled the slowest city in the world. Some projections suggest that by 2035, average speed could fall to around 4 kilometers per hour, meaning near total gridlock. Behind that slowness is a massive economic bill. Dhaka is estimated to lose about 3.2 million working hours every single day due to congestion. Over a year, that adds up to roughly 1.168 billion hours, costing around $11 billion annually, about 2.4% of GDP. Some comparisons even say that every second, the city burns 37 hours of productivity in traffic. It sounds absurd, but it captures the scale of the loss. One part of the problem is an aging vehicle fleet still on the road. More than 70,000 vehicles are past their legal lifespan, including nearly 29,000 buses over 20 years old and more than 46,000 trucks over 25 years old. Despite bans, pressure from transport unions has kept many of these vehicles running, adding to accidents and pollution. The human cost shows up clearly in accident data. In 2024, around 8,543 people were killed in traffic accidents nationwide, roughly 23 deaths a day, almost one every hour. Children made up nearly 16% of victims, and pedestrians over 21%. Dhaka alone recorded 394 crashes and 246 deaths in a single year, showing how risk is compressed into dense urban space. Life on buses is another story. Only about 26% of passengers manage to stay fully inside. The remaining 74% are squeezed in or forced to hang onto doors and steps while the bus is moving. Elderly people, women, and children often struggle the most during peak hours. Rail transport is overloaded in a dangerous way too. Riding on train roofs or clinging to the outside of carriages has existed for years and is often blamed for high death rates among young people. At speeds around 60 kilometers per hour, a slip can mean falling from about 5 meters high. History has recorded multiple accidents with massive casualties. In this environment, rickshaws fill the streets, with between 400,000 and 600,000 operating on busy days. But the health cost for drivers is heavy. Studies suggest lung capacity can drop by up to 50% over time, and nearly half report being ill within the past 2 weeks. Daily income is often around $3, sometimes falling to $1.28 while they pedal for hours in extreme heat. Add to that rising deaths from electric shocks, often linked to people riding on train roofs and touching high-voltage wires. All of it adds up to a transport system that isn't just slow, but dangerous. Number 10. A tribe that honors daughters and overlooks sons. What hidden rules turn everything upside down? In the remote hill regions near the border between Bangladesh and India, there's a community that surprises many people by flipping the usual social order of South Asia. This is the Mandi, also known as the Garo, numbering around 25,000 people. Even though about 90% have converted to Christianity, they still maintain a rare matrilineal system. Lineage, property, and inheritance pass through women. Land and clan identity follow the mother's line, while men often act as managers rather than owners. Within this structure, the youngest daughter, known as the Nakna, may inherit most of the family property, while older sisters receive limited usage rights. If a woman refuses a clan-approved marriage, she risks losing her inheritance. This shows that matrilineal does not mean absolute freedom. It's a system designed to preserve lineage in its own way. Why are daughters placed at the center? The logic is straightforward in social terms. Sons usually leave their mother's home and move in with their wife's family, meaning they do not preserve their mother's property or clan. Daughters become the anchor that keeps land and lineage from breaking apart. Marriage here is tightly tied to protecting clan structure, not just personal choice. The system also includes controversial rules. Widows may be required to remarry within their late husband's clan, and when suitable men are scarce, Extreme solutions may be used to preserve clan bonds. One case often mentioned is Arola, who said she only realized at age 15 that she had been considered married since age 3, a stark example of how community interests can outweigh individual consent. Bride-capturing traditions also reflect female authority. A woman can choose the man she wants to marry, and her family formally brings the groom into their home through ritual. It shows women as decision-makers, but also highlights the pressure of clan honor, because marriage is never just about two people. Compared to the Muslim majority of Bangladesh, the Mandi differ in allowing both men and women to divorce and remarry. A man may marry up to 3 times if the community agrees. Still, recent surveys show a gradual shift toward patriarchy. More men resist moving into their wife's home, sons are starting to receive land through legal documents, and fathers are gaining more influence over marriage decisions. Even so, local female leaders admit many families quietly maintain traditional rituals, especially since the church discourages polygamy and clan-based marriage customs. Number 11. Dead rivers: what killed the waterways that once sustained entire regions. In Bangladesh, many rivers that once acted as lifelines for entire civilizations are slipping into what experts call biological death. The water can turn black like burned oil, and dissolved oxygen drops to extreme lows, in some places, levels as low as 0. 14 milligrams per liter have been recorded, while most aquatic life needs at least 6 to survive. When oxygen approaches 0, a river stops being an ecosystem and starts behaving like an open waste channel. Data shows oxygen levels have been falling for decades. Around the year 2000, some rivers still measured about 2 milligrams per liter, but by 2019 they had reached 0. By 2025, environmental experts admitted that saving certain rivers may be nearly impossible, as oxygen levels have dropped beyond recovery. When a river loses oxygen, recovery is not just about filtering water, it's about rebuilding an entire living system. Every day, river systems receive about 350 tons of toxic waste from nearly 7,000 factories, more than 127,000 tons a year. On top of that come tens of thousands of cubic meters of chemicals from the leather industry, including chromium and industrial salts. Biological oxygen demand levels have been measured between 82 and 163 milligrams per liter, roughly 20 times higher than what a healthy river can handle. At that point, water is no longer safe for fish, farming, or daily use. It becomes an industrial waste basin. The collapse of ecosystems triggers a collapse in livelihoods. Around 30,000 fishing families have been recorded as unemployed for half the year because nothing can survive in the water. Entire fishing villages have fallen apart, and younger generations abandon the trade. Over the past 50 years, fish species have dropped from 475 to 394, a loss of 81 species. When fish disappear, it's not just food that vanishes, it's a way of life. Health impacts spread quietly but widely. Estimates suggest about 8.5% of all deaths are linked to water and sanitation, around 100,000 people each year. Nearly 4 million residents of Dhaka live near polluted rivers and face daily exposure. Many suffer chronic skin conditions, respiratory problems, and digestive illness. Heavy metals build up in soil, fish, and crops, increasing risks of cancer and organ damage. Farming along rivers suffers as soil changes color, yields drop, and families are forced to rely on groundwater instead. Authorities have admitted that river restoration is extremely difficult because riverbeds are layered with plastic, polythene, and toxic sediments. Even if dumping stopped today, recovery could take decades, and some rivers may never return to their original state. International assessments have ranked the Buriganga among the most polluted rivers, with others like the Turag, Balu, Shitalaksha, Daleshwari, and Karnafuli moving toward critical levels. Rivers that once provided water, fish, transport, and fertile land now stand as stark reminders of the cost of unchecked industrial growth. Number 12. When crime becomes a way to survive. Why breaking the law feels like the only option. In major Bangladeshi cities like Dhaka, Chittagong, and Khulna, urban crime has shifted from being a fringe issue to an ecosystem running alongside daily life. As insecurity grows, people juggle poverty, internal migration, and unstable jobs. In that environment, breaking the law can start to look like a survival response rather than pure criminal intent. It's uncomfortable, but it's how some societies function when too many people compete for too little. In 2020, around 187,926 crimes were officially recorded, but many see this as just the surface. Estimates suggest only about 26% of incidents are reported, while roughly 74% of victims never contact police. The reasons go beyond time. People fear harassment, extortion, or retaliation. Silence becomes a form of self-protection. In public spaces, crime often works through coordination. Pickpocketing in crowded markets relies on pushing and distraction. On buses or rickshaws, tight space favors thieves because victims can barely react. At night, mobile robbery gangs use motorcycles and carry knives or homemade guns. In January 2025 alone, 294 murders were recorded, signaling a rise in violence. The most disturbing part is what stays invisible. A national survey found about 74.4% of households experienced corruption involving police. Around 67.4% said they had to pay money at police stations, averaging nearly 62 British pounds per case. When people must pay for protection, trust collapses and crime becomes normalized. Alongside this are mastians, local crime bosses who operate like shadow governments. In many slums, they control housing, water, electricity, and services. Some networks even operate from inside prisons and maintain political ties. In public transport alone, groups have been recorded collecting up to $52,000 a day across about 20 collection points. For drivers and operators, this becomes a cost of survival. Children are the most vulnerable. An estimated 600,000 street children live in Bangladesh, about 75% of them in Dhaka. Many are recruited into crime networks to carry contraband, collect extortion, or steal. Studies suggest over half commit crimes due to coercion, and about 66% due to survival pressure. When a child must choose between hunger and crime, the choice becomes deeply distorted. As a result, fear spreads. Surveys show 71% of residents worry about being robbed, and only 26% feel safe walking at night. Even with crackdowns, crime remains hard to reduce as long as poverty, corruption, and urban migration remain unresolved. Here, crime isn't just a security issue, it's a structural problem. Number 13. A civilization living under pressure. How do people survive when everything feels like it's about to break? From the outside, many social rules in Bangladesh can seem strict or conservative. But inside one of the most densely populated countries on Earth, those rules often function as shock absorbers that keep society from collapsing. Bangladesh averages about 1,301 people per square kilometer, shrinking the idea of personal space. Dhaka is the extreme example. From just over 335,000 people in 1950, it has grown to around 24.6 million by 2025, adding more than 700,000 people in a single year. When physical space can't expand fast enough, society builds cultural barriers to reduce friction. In cities, the average bedroom space per person is only about 6.9 square meters. Outside wealthy areas, many families live in spaces under 50 square feet, smaller than prison cells in some Western countries. In slums, 3/4 of households live in a single room. About 25% of the population shares toilets. In informal housing, average space drops to around 3.7 square meters per person. At that density, small behaviors like speaking loudly, public affection, or pushing in crowds can quickly trigger conflict. Limiting public displays of intimacy becomes less about morality and more about social stability. Modest dress codes can also be seen through a safety lens. In crowded spaces with constant attention, blending in can make daily movement easier for women. Stories of people being disciplined for not covering properly or workplaces treating short sleeves as misconduct show how norms become formalized. They act like protective fences, even though personal freedom shrinks as a result. Environmental pressure adds another layer. Bangladesh produces around 25,000 tons of waste every day. Dhaka alone generates about 8,000 tons, but only around 37% is collected. That leaves roughly 3,000 tons flowing into rivers, drains, and streets daily, causing flooding and disease. When infrastructure fails, communities rely on behavioral rules like not littering to protect collective health. There's also a modern surveillance network. More than 20 laws allow monitoring and signal interception, with telecom companies required to cooperate. In a society where order can fracture easily due to density, surveillance becomes a risk management tool. At the same time, it creates a feeling that public life is always being watched, so what looks harsh from the outside often functions as a survival system. It's how a civilization continues operating at the edge of its limits, balancing population, space, and fragile infrastructure. Number 14. Where rivers turn into land. What makes water suddenly change shape? In Bangladesh, some communities live in a reality where land is never stable. Rivers can swallow homes, fields, and entire villages in just a few rainy seasons. When erosion takes everything, families move on to boats and turn water into an address. An estimated 300,000 Manta people have lived on water for generations. For many families, the idea of returning to land is vague because fixed land life exists only in memory. Studies show that between 1973 and 2017, Bangladesh lost over 162,000 hectares of land to river erosion, more than twice the size of Singapore. On average, about 32 square kilometers vanish each year. Sediment can create new land, but it doesn't replace lost homes, farms, or communities. On Char Islands, temporary land formations, about 6.5 million people live in fragile conditions. In some areas, up to 96% of households have lost all their farmland to erosion and sand. They build, lose, and rebuild, trapped in a loop with no clear end. From that instability, a floating economy emerges. River markets and boat-based trade networks become vital. In Barishal, a floating guava market has existed for over 200 years. It connects about 20,000 farming households across 31,000 acres and supplies roughly 60% of the local guava market. When land can't be trusted, commerce learns to float. Water also becomes a classroom. Bangladesh runs more than 100 floating schools that act as mobile classrooms, libraries, and flood shelters. These schools allow around 22,000 students to keep learning, with about 70,000 people benefiting since 2002. On wooden boats powered by solar panels, children learn reading, math, and water filtration skills. Education here isn't just knowledge, it's adaptation. But water is also a sign of climate displacement. In 2019, about 4.1 million people were forced from their homes by disasters. Projections suggest that by 2050, up to 23 million people, about 1 in 7 Bangladeshis, could be displaced. Each monsoon affects around 1 million residents, and cyclones create repeated waves of movement. In Dhaka itself, the Buriganga River tells a darker story. Every day it receives massive industrial wastewater and thousands of tons of trash. About 4 million people living nearby face daily exposure, with children showing high rates of death from diarrhea and contaminated water. In Bangladesh, rivers turning into land is a geological story, a livelihood story, and sometimes a survival story. Number 15. How a single cow can bring an entire city to a standstill. Why does everyone step aside? In Bangladesh, sometimes one cow in the wrong place is enough to freeze an entire intersection. It sounds exaggerated, but in a society where religion and urban life overlap, an incident involving a cow can become more than a traffic problem. With over 13 million Hindus, cows carry deep meanings of purity and order. Harming one can be seen as harming belief itself. A small incident can quickly draw a crowd and ignite tension. At the same time, the same country hosts massive animal sacrifice markets during Eid al-Adha. In just a few days, millions of animals move through these markets, and money flows from cities to rural areas. The seasonal trade is estimated at over $11 billion. The scale is so large that during COVID-19, restrictions were once relaxed to keep rural livelihoods from collapsing. Livestock here is not only religious, it's economic. For rural families, raising a cow for about 6 months is like holding a living savings account. When the festival arrives, selling or sacrificing that cow can provide the largest income of the year. While city residents buy meat for rituals, rural households convert months of labor into cash. It's a kind of bank that just happens to moo. In Dhaka, festival season reshapes the streets. Around 19 temporary cattle markets are set up inside the city. Sellers often sleep beside their animals for days to protect their investment. Traffic adjusts to livestock transport, and crowded areas turn into cow routes instead of car lanes. The contradiction becomes clearer when looking across borders. In parts of India, disputes over cows have triggered mob violence and even deaths, yet cattle are still smuggled across the border into Bangladesh to supply the legal sacrifice market. The same animal can live 2 completely different realities depending on which side of the border it stands. In everyday life, cows roaming urban areas also contribute to accidents. Authorities may try to create shelters or issue fines, but enforcement runs into cultural barriers. Managing cows is not just about animal control. It's about managing belief, economy, and identity. That's why in Bangladesh, a single cow doesn't just slow traffic, it forces an entire city to slow down to avoid touching something far more sensitive. These 15 stories weren't told just to shock you. They're real slices of how people live, endure, and survive in a world under pressure. Each title is a hidden corner, and when you put them together, you get a picture most people avoid looking at. If this video gave you something to think about, hit like to support the channel and help it reach more people. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the next journey where we uncover the stories nobody really talks about. Thanks for staying until the end, and I'll see you in the next video.